So you remember how I mentioned back during the Night Sisters thing about how, if a certain thing is a type of story you just don't like, even if it's well executed, you're not going to like it? Coffee, the definition of coffee. Yeah. By memory, I despise these episodes. In fact, I've always kind of mentally excluded them from rewatches or from, my own EU headcanon, which I could talk about at length because we all have our own EU headcanon because the EU contradicts itself, and there's certain parts of the EU that just don't fit with other parts of the EU, so everyone kind of cherry picks the EU to some extent or another. But the idea of the manifestation of the dark side, the manifestation of the light side, and the manifestation of balancing between the two, as people who live on the Atlas, No Man's Sky joke, in a force locus that's also a magnet for the universe, where force ghosts can go to apparently, and which is basically a planet literally made of force. I mean, there's a concept that I don't know if that is a proper term. So there's two types of magic in fantasy, right? There's magic, which is how I usually think of it, how it actually is usually presented. For the most part, magic tends to be self-consistent. You establish rules for how magic works, you work through those rules. Then there's magic, or sorry, I don't actually have literal confetti. Just picture confetti coming out of my hands where I go, magic! And that's, the other way that magic tends to be portrayed. Where it can do anything and doesn't need to have any rules or consistency, so the writers can make it do literally anything they want it to. Harry Potter, excuse me. No, but you get my point. There are plenty of settings that portray that as that. Now, usually a writer will do that deliberately, not just to be lazy, but for the fact that they want magic to be something undefinable and something uncalculatable, something that is, rather than being another layer of science, being something that just defies all reason. But that leads to things like this episode, where it's magic, except as the Force instead. But that is pretty much what it is. They don't need to define how these things happen. They don't need to find the visions, the recreation of the planet, the nature of how two people could be in the same coordinates and yet not interact with each other. They don't need to define anything. It's magic, confetti, and that's all they have to do to define it. And again, I'm not saying that that's always a lazy writing thing or a bad writing thing, but I don't like it. I like things to be self-consistent and defined. Now, we could probably make up rules for this, but it's clear the writers didn't bother. The best possible explanation for all of this could be explained away with a single word: illusion. And when you have to rely on that to explain everything away... And then we've got the whole, he's the chosen one, because we just got to remember, we got to remind everyone that he's the chosen one. Keeping in mind that based on certain interpretations, there was never a chosen one, or that the chosen one was someone who was crafted specifically to be the chosen one. In other words, there was a prophecy for someone of these attributes, and someone went out of the way to make someone of those attributes, right? I mean, there's all kinds of things that just make the chosen one kind of go boop out the window if you think about it. But here we are. Anakin is the chosen one. He is super whatever. And, yeah. I don't really... what do you want me to say? Right? We'll talk more about the overall concepts of this, because this is like a 3-parter or 4-parter or whatever. So we'll be discussing more about these three and their inclusion into the Star Wars mythos as we go forward. But I got nothing, I'm sorry if I'm going to be a little more negative over the next couple of episodes, but I'm probably going to be a little more negative over the next couple of episodes. See you there, guys.